Hi, guys. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tracy Lehman, the Community Outreach Counselor for Nick Finnegan Counseling Center. And I am here with Madison Bradley. We're creating one of our resource videos for COVID-19 to help support people in their mental health and self-care. So Madison's here, and we're going to talk about anxiety today. So Madison, do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I've been at an FCC for over a year and a half. I've been counseling a little longer than that. And I work a good bit with anxiety. I specialize a lot in trauma, which intersects often with anxiety, kind of from all ages. So like roughly 5 to 85. And so kind of the whole age spectrum within that. And let's see. Yeah, kind of come at it from, I think there's, for me personally, some different ways I try to help people along with that. One is their EMDR certification, which is for that trauma piece to try to find if there's something underlying anxiety for people, as well as kind of CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, of noticing, just what kind of things we're telling ourselves and what thoughts and feelings connect there, and kind of looking at the greater narrative that we kind of have in our lives, and smaller narratives within that might be helpful or unhelpful. And then honestly, kind of in this time of global pandemic, which never before in my life, thinking through just how to use kind of all this around anxiety for myself. And I think probably a lot of us, counselors or not, are figuring that out, of that this time looks a lot different than we're used to it looking.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Can you tell everyone a little bit about, I think all of us have some kind of an idea of what anxiety is, especially right now. I'm sure, like you said, a lot of us are experiencing different forms of anxiety. But can you tell us a little bit about what exactly anxiety is? Why does it occur?
Yeah. So a couple of thoughts I have on that. One is, I think, we use anxiety a couple different ways, kind of in our normal vocabulary. So I looked up in the dictionary, and they define it as like a feeling of worry, nervousness, or unease, typically about an imminent event or something with an uncertain outcome. And so that explains kind of all of right now, uncertain outcomes, imminent things. But I think when counselors, when we talk about it, we often mean kind of a state of that excessive uneasiness or apprehension. So something that's ongoing, not just for a moment, but that lasts longer. And I think it's also important to note, again, in this time where with a pandemic, there's things don't necessarily seem excessively like sometimes our anxiety feels like a very normal response to the level of things that are changing. And so it can also be important to notice, in a time like now, when again, strong reactions might make sense, kind of how long we're staying in that anxiety, that kind of amped up sort of place. So that, that kind of ties into, like, everyone's heard of our fight, flight, freeze response that we have, to unknown or dangerous situations, which this hits most of those for a lot of us. And so even if, again, a response is somewhat normative in a time of tons of change and stressors, wanting to notice like how long we're letting ourselves, our bodies, stay in that response, kind of that cortisol, that stress that keeps our body on edge and starts to really affect a lot of our different, like, our thoughts, feelings, body sensations, and behaviors, when we kind of get stuck in that on mode. And so I would point that out for anxiety. I think we use it a lot of different ways, but that's kind of, I think, important for people to keep in mind during COVID.
So you were talking about fight, flight, and freeze. Can you talk a little bit about tuning into sensations and how long they last? Can you talk a little bit about how those symptoms might be manifesting in somebody who might be struggling with their
Yeah.
anxiety levels right now?
So, I think one thing to note, like, anxiety affects pretty much all of our aspects as a person, but it can be, some of us maybe are more aware of one area than another. So for some people, that might be more about thoughts. If there's a lot more questions of what if, or kind of negative thoughts jumping around, or kind of even quickening thoughts, if there just feels like there's a ton going through our mind. So that's something to watch for. For feelings, some of us are more aware of those. Maybe we feel really overwhelmed, or just intensely, really anything, whether that's irritable or fearful or angry, just an intense feeling. I think in our bodies can be important to notice, like, for a lot of people, there's a tightening, whether that's in your chest or your arms or anywhere else, just kind of going around feeling really on edge or tight. Difficulty even breathing when we get really tight can come up. And I think right now that one can be extra kind of a spiral of anxiety then if we get anxious and we feel tight and then it feels hard to breathe and then we're thinking about symptoms of COVID. And so trying to be aware of that can also be a symptom of anxiety, just that tightness. And then I think even in areas like relationships and behaviors, maybe feeling more disconnected or irritable can be something to watch for with our kids or spouses or roommates or neighbors, whoever that comes out with. And then behaviors might be a lot of difficulty focusing, wanting to constantly check in on news or scroll, and just, yeah, maybe feeling either hyper aware of everything around you or kind of not noticing what's going around you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great explanation, actually. I was thinking, I didn't even, and I work with people with anxiety too, and I didn't even put together just now until you said it about how when you have anxiety and your breath gets short, like for me, anxiety, I feel it in my back.
Yeah.
I get a lot of tenseness like around my neck and shoulder blades. And sometimes it's hard to breathe. It's hard to get a breath in. I hadn't even put together that when you can't put a breath in, that's also could make you think you have COVID. And then you get in that cycle of like,
And
now
then
I'm
it's more anxious
maybe
and
I'm
more
sick.
tight,
What's
more trouble
happening?
breathing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That feeds back into itself. On that note, can you talk a little bit about with the clients you've been working with, what maybe you've seen as far as anxiety, especially related to being stuck at home with this pandemic?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that can be, yeah, totally unique to each person, but some things we're all going through that come up often is just the uncertainty of everything right now. And some weeks it gets a little more so, some weeks less, like when they've put in different, yeah, stay at home orders that at least we know what the next couple weeks look like. And then some weeks we don't really know. And so I think uncertainty comes up a lot. We're used to knowing that if we go to the store, there will be toilet paper. Like there's just things we're used to being certain of that we're not now. And that can get even bigger. And things like, yeah, job loss and financial fears that come up that again can tie in with anxiety, but they're not irrational. Like they're important things to be thinking on. But we still at some point usually move out of really preparing and grieving that sometimes into kind of obsessively thinking about that to a point where it's not really helpful or adaptive. So I think a lot of people, again, have understandable anxiety around job loss and finances, but that can still move towards a really unhelpful, unhealthy place. Uncertainty, trying to plan for the future, not knowing how to, yeah, looking for reassurance, and then things that tie into other things like loneliness kind of can add to our anxiety right now, I think. And then honestly, for a lot of parents I've talked with, things around anxiety around kids, what they're missing out on, maybe feeling their fears with them or worrying about their level of homeschool abilities or just kind of all of the aspects of that right now can bring up a lot of anxiety too,
Yeah,
in addition to just the actual virus, but all these other things too.
sure. Yeah, it's challenging us in a lot of different roles that makes us really question our abilities and our safety and all kinds of
Yeah.
things, the safety of others. How are we taking care of others? Are we able to step into all these roles? Can we be enough?
Yeah,
All those things.
maybe enough is huge.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and what kind of things do you think going on right now can exacerbate anxiety? Like, what role do you think stress plays? What role do you think stepping into all these roles plays right now with anxiety?
Yeah, so I want to come back to stress in just a moment, but I think a couple of really simple but important things for people to think about. I kind of lumped them all into lack of, but lack of structure, I think, is a huge thing right now, as most of us, our structure is not normal or doesn't exist at all, depending on the situation. And so I think it's really important for most of us, even if we don't want to be super structured, to find some sort of rhythm or some things that can be structured, whether that's when meal breaks are, or when bedtime is, or when's going to be your space to go get up and take a walk. And so I think lack of structure can be an exacerbator, but one that we can put structure in ourselves. And along with that, lack of sleep, I think, adds to anxiety a lot. So when we get out of structure, or we're feeling anxious at night and we don't sleep well, and then there's a whole day to get through, that just kind of, it makes it a lot harder to keep that in check. And so I might come back to that later, but ways to try to calm down at night or set a structure, I think are important. And really just, um, yeah, I know sometimes we talk about this almost, it can seem annoyingly too much as counselors, but really health in general is a really great way to combat anxiety. And on the flip side, when we don't have it, it tends to add to anxiety, whether that's unhealthy eating in the sense of tons of sugar or no water, or tons of coffee that's a stimulant, or not getting to move around and walk. Um, Really, the more we just kind of sit still and don't have like that, the more we're just going to sit in anxiety. So I think that's important for people to take notice of, hey, do I have a routine going? Am I getting sleep? Am I getting movement? Am I remembering to keep eating? Um, and then kind of lack of connection, I think can really make that hard too. And so in this weird time when we're not as connected, being intentional to find ways to still feel connected, even if it's not through our normal ways. Yeah, and then stress. I mean, stress plays into all of that, making all of that harder. But I think, yeah, stress is really important to notice for anxiety. That, yeah, stress. They're kind of. I think how I want to say this. They're similar, but a little different.
Mhm.
Um, Stress at some level can be helpful for deadlines or things. Like it's important sometimes for us to get a little more energy going. But again, when it gets stuck in that on place for a long period of time, it has a lot of negative health effects and often becomes that anxiety. Or if we have anxiety already going on and we add stress to it, we're going to just be adding things into our body that literally increase anxiety with kind of our internal hormones and neurotransmitters. Um, and so I think we all do need to keep an eye on stress. And first of all, just be gracious with ourselves to realize, hey, there's a lot of stress going on. Like I can't get rid of all of it. I might be a little more irritable, and I have to accept that while I move towards trying to still connect. But also noticing that if we just stay in that stress thinking we're helping ourselves by really being on top of everything, all we might actually be doing is increasing our anxiety, and maybe seeing that come out in ways like, again, being really irritable with people that we love, or having a lot of anger towards things that maybe your 6-year-old did something and there's just a ton of anger that comes up in you, and you have to think, that's not a normal response to that. What else is going on inside of me? um, Maybe this is not about my children, maybe this is about something else. And so I think just we need to really all be pretty aware probably of yeah, of what is going on internally and where we can mitigate stress or notice it.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. I was thinking about, I mean, you've already mentioned a bunch of really good tools for managing anxiety. Can you talk a little bit more of that? And I was thinking a little bit about how gratitude and mind shifts can help us combat this stress and anxiety reaction we might be having. That might be anger, it might be not being able to function, or whatever the case may be. What kinds of things can we use to help mitigate that a little bit?
Yeah, yeah. So I'll kind of, maybe I'll lump them into categories. So kind of what I said before, but I'll add a little more detail to that. So um, again, anything we can do to kind of normalize things, adding structure, sleep, um, activity, exercise, walks. Those are all going to be really helpful for lots of things, but anxiety too. And then I think another good one is really just, in a sense, having an active form of processing. And so that might look like journaling. That might look like writing out maybe the thoughts or feelings that you're having, which kind of helps us move from more of the anxiety emotion side of our brain into, hey, let me think through this, let me write it. Moves us more into our part of the brain where we're able to more logically think through things, because I think we often think when we're spiraling anxiety that we are making arguments, we're rationalizing things, but we're really not. Usually we're just focusing on that negative side. And so often people find journaling helps get it out, and move into a place where they can see what's actually going on. Similarly, talking with somebody out loud to somebody else can be a little similar to writing, helps us kind of get out of our heads. And then for some people, even getting to create something, whether that's artwork or something else, gets to move kind of like gratitude into that more creative headspace, which is more innovative, more able to see the bigger picture rather than getting focused in on that negative. Um, and that ties into gratitude. I think It can sound sometimes silly or like a really small thing to um, to create a list of things you're grateful for in a pandemic. They can feel so much smaller than the big things that are out of whack. Um, but gratitude in the studies that have come out, there's actually a lot of research on it, seems to really have a unique way of getting us out of a hyper focus, intentional or not, on the negative things in life into, hey, but what is still good? What is still there? Um, and that seems to literally change the direction of our brain into one that's building different neural pathways, building different things inside our brain towards being able to zoom out from the minutia and the facts that are stressful to the big picture of what is still good here. Um, and that has a way of really combating anxiety too, because we're focusing in on the other side and we're not only then focusing on the negative, which stands out more to us, but getting to zoom out. And so I think yeah, whether that looks like doing that at night as a way to help you go to sleep, or even I've had people that say it's really hard to even have a moment to do that when there's kind of kids or little ones running around. And so if your kids are old enough, I think even making that to a family activity can actually be really helpful. To have maybe everyone at dinner or lunch go around and say one or two things they're grateful for that day. Can make that into a routine where you don't have to add anything. People are already sitting down for dinner, but where the whole family gets to hear what each other are thinking about and be encouraged that way. Yeah, and I just want to add one more. I know I've probably shared too many. Please don't anyone feel like you should go do all of these at one time. Um, but I think that finding ways to get in touch with our body too, because we talked about a moment ago that anxiety can have that tightness in our neck or our chest. And it can be important for our bodies to get to have relief or ways to slow down too. And that might look like really slow, deep breaths. One way is to breathe in for 4 seconds, hold it, maybe something like 7 seconds. If it's easier, remember 4, 7, 8. Breathe in 4, hold for 7, and then slowly breathe out for much longer than you breathed in. For some people, it might be holding their diaphragm while they breathe, to really just have a moment to slow down, because slowing down also is the exact opposite process of anxiety. It's amping up and racing. Or even just noticing maybe our senses. Maybe that's on the walk you were maybe already taking, as most of us are taking one to keep sanity right now. And to feel normal and grounded is to add the extra thing of, hey, what do I see as I'm looking around? What flowers are out? What's there? What can I touch as I walk by, or my feet digging into the ground, or even what you're wearing? What can I hear? What can I smell? And again, that may be what am I grateful for? That really can help us slow down and just be in our body and noticing what's going on, rather than just if we're in our head with anxiety. And that kind of naturally seems to take us out of there too.
Yeah. I like that, the walks. I like that you've mentioned that a few times, and getting outside. I think,
Yeah.
after, for you and I, like, we're on screens all day doing sessions, and I feel like just the sitting that creates this fatigue, but it also like stimulates that part of your brain. So I think telling people to like step outside and be in nature, I think that's been a lifesaver for me,
Yeah.
with anxiety, and then doing some meditation or breathing or
Yeah.
relaxation is great. Can you talk a little bit about, for people who maybe they're trying these things, when would somebody know that their anxiety maybe is beyond what they can manage on their own? How would somebody, know that and reach out for help in those situations?
Yeah. Yeah. And that, in a sense, that line might look different for each person. And yet, um, I, yeah, I'm a little biased, but I think it's usually better for people to come in earlier rather than trying to decide if they're at the end of the rope, because it's a lot easier to get tools earlier when you're not in a place of yeah, really really high anxiety. So I would tell people, I'll give you some things that maybe definitely consider coming in for if they're going on, but I'd also encourage people, if things are just maybe getting really frustrating in this weird time at home, or they're just incredibly irritable with family members, or they're feeling a lot of discomfort or distress, like, you don't have to ask if it's bad enough to see somebody, maybe it's helpful to check in or get some tools or just have outside perspective, even if you're not sure that you've hit that full level of having to come in, it can still be helpful. But yeah, I think a couple things to look out for. One would be, yeah, if you're having a ton of the physical sensations, that might kind of be at a place of having a full panic attack, which I do want to clarify. No judgment if someone uses these words differently. But a panic attack, I hear a lot of people talk about anxiety attacks, and you might mean the same thing. But a panic attack is not just having a moment of feeling high anxiety. It's really specific things, and anyone who's experienced them knows that it's very different than just a moment of anxiety. It might look like, yeah, incredibly difficult time breathing, even your kind of vision changing. Some people feel like they're having a heart attack, or they'll wake up to it and honestly think they're having a heart attack. And so I do, yeah, if you're at a place where you're waking up with really intense anxiety, or you're having a place where it's hard to breathe, um, or you're having kind of a full panic attack with those things, that can even, yeah, nausea, dizzy, just all sorts of symptoms that feel really concerning in the moment can all go with anxiety. And so I'd recommend someone coming in, if they're having that, to get to maybe unpack that, to understand immediate coping for that, to not have to have those intense, to at least not feel confused about what those are about. So if anyone's having intense physical symptoms of anxiety, that can be a really helpful time to come in, to figure out what's going on with that. And then, like I said earlier, if there's just anyone who's maybe having a lot of interpersonal problems with this right now, or maybe so much anxiety that it's hard to do the things you'd like to be able to do right now, whether that's work, or connection with people or something else, to go ahead and, yeah, and have some additional tools to not be alone in that.
Yeah. I think people can even call. I like that you're just like come in earlier, if you
Yeah.
feel like you just need a little help. And you can even just come in for one session, and we're all doing telehealth right now. So if anybody needs to learn a little bit about telehealth, we have a video with our clinical director talking a little bit about that. And we also have an article on our resource page. But yeah, you can just come in for one session and just see if there's some goals you have, or just a few. It doesn't have to be a long-term thing. It could just be developing resources. Um, and then, yeah, and then what you were saying about panic attacks, it's so interesting how different people's understanding of panic attacks can be. But I've definitely had clients come in who were referred from the hospital, they thought they were,
Yeah.
going to die. They were having a heart attack, and had an ambulance and everything, and went to the hospital. So the severity of a panic attack can be pretty scary and intense.
Yeah.
So thanks for clarifying that. Um, I want to just give a quick summary. I want to make sure I capture everything you said about anxiety, and just some quick tips that you gave out were, if you notice that your mood is different than normal, or you feel like you're having racing thoughts, or you're noticing tension, and there's a bunch of different other things you noted. But if your body or mind just feels off,
Yeah.
in a way that's maybe more fear driven and stress driven, then some things you can do that you were talking about were like practicing gratitude, practicing breathing, checking in with yourself, and noticing where you can slow things down, and attuning to your senses and what's in the moment. So I think,
Yeah. And just to sort of interrupt you one more time, you mentioned meditation yourself, and I think meditation, yeah, is awesome and a great practice to build. But I even mentioned like the senses and checking in with yourself, because for some of us it's intimidating to start with full on meditation. And so, that's where some of those other ones too can kind of be small ways to do that if you're totally new to this and meditation sounds like something outside of what you've normally done. But I definitely recommend, meditation as well.
oh yeah, thanks. Yeah, my mind automatically goes to meditation. I think I'm a big proponent of it, but I agree with you. I love that you were mentioning the starting slower with like tuning into your senses. Audrey did a great grounding video on that.
Yeah.
That if you guys want to see, it's part of our Calm in the Chaos series. So yeah, is there anything else you want to add, Madison? I think you did a great job kind of helping us understand anxiety and how to cope a little more during this unprecedented time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I can't think of anything immediately other than, I guess, um, yeah, I think probably everyone, I guess to summarize a piece for me too, is probably going through differing levels of anxiety right now at some point in the last couple of weeks. And so I hope that lots of people can at least take something from this, or maybe even share with each other if there's something you've learned that you want to get to share with a family or friend. Yeah, and how to get through it, how to be cultivating hope and able to kind of see outside to creative solutions and to not feel alone in it. And so, yeah, I just recommend people, if you have maybe even gone through anxiety and you have tools, you might have a lot more to share with people around you who haven't gone through this level of this before. And so, um, yeah, well, I highly recommend coming in for professional counseling as well. I guess I want to throw it out there that this can be a helpful time to be pouring into each other as well if people have tools that they can share.
Absolutely. Community is so important right
Yeah.
now. And the coming together can be so helpful in mitigating so many different mental health concerns that could come up right now. So thank you so much, Madison. This was great. I really appreciate it. And we'll see y'all next time.